It was a quiet morning in the village of Olo, nestled between the rolling hills and lush forests that surrounded the land. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow over the earth, and the birds sang their early songs as the villagers went about their daily routines. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh dew on the grass, and the faint promise of something new. In the heart of the village stood its bustling market, a place where merchants and traders from all around the region gathered to sell their wares. The market was a vibrant tapestry of sounds. The chatter of people haggling, the rhythmic clinking of metal as blacksmiths hammered their craft, and the sweet earthy scent of fruits, vegetables, and spices from the many stalls. The market had always been a place of community and tradition, where people came not only to buy goods but also to share stories, pass on knowledge, and celebrate the rich cultural heritage of the village. But one bright and early morning, there was a disturbance in the usual rhythm of the market. A new face had appeared, and it was unlike any the village had seen before. Amara, a tall woman with striking features and an air of quiet confidence, had set up her small station at the far edge of the market. She was not just another vendor. She was a hair braider, and her booth was surrounded by curious onlookers. The people who had visited the market that morning were puzzled. No one had seen her before, nor had they ever heard of anyone traveling from nearby villages who braided hair with such skill. She sat quietly, her hands moving deftly through the long locks of hair she was braiding. She was completely focused on her work, her fingers weaving intricate patterns as if the hair was a canvas and her comb a paintbrush. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, and there was something captivating about the way she braided. The women who had come to the market that day had also stopped by, drawn by the beauty of her work. They peered over the shoulders of the women sitting in her chair, watching as Amara's hands created beautiful and intricate styles that seemed to shimmer with an almost magical quality. Each braid, each twist, appeared to hold an elegance they had never seen before in their village. No one had ever braided hair in such a way, so flawless, so delicate, yet so bold. As she worked, Amara did not speak a word to anyone. She didn't greet the villagers or make small talk with her customers, who were now growing more curious about this woman. Some of the older women in the market began to whisper among themselves. "She doesn't talk. Not even a single word," said Mama Igioma, the village's most seasoned hair braider, who had been in the trade for as long as anyone could remember. "I've never seen a braider like her. She just sits there working in silence." "She must be mute," replied Olamide, another woman who had been watching Amara work. "Perhaps she's been like this for many years. Maybe something terrible happened to her." The whispers spread like wildfire, and soon the villagers had settled on a name for her. The Silent Braider, they began to call her. And though no one knew much about her, her quiet presence in the market was enough to draw the attention of everyone who passed by. By midday, a long queue had formed around Amara's stall. Women, young and old, were eager to have their hair braided by the Silent Braider. It was strange, even for those who had seen many hair braiders come and go over the years, to see so many people lined up for a single person's services. Amara had become a mysterious force in the village, and the women who had waited their turn, despite the long hours of standing in line, were mesmerized by the results. Some of the older hair braiders, like Mama Igioma and Adama, watched from their own stalls with growing jealousy. They had seen the influx of customers that Amara had brought in. Their own businesses had suffered as women now preferred to queue for hours at Amara's station, rather than sit with their longtime braiders. The once bustling stalls of the established braiders sat empty, and they were beginning to feel the sting of competition. "It's unfair," Mama Igioma grumbled to Adama. "How does she do it? Why are they all flocking to her? What's her secret?" Adama shrugged, her face tight with frustration. "I don't know. She doesn't talk, and there's something unsettling about her. But we can't deny it, her braids are beautiful. It's like she's weaving something magical into them." The two women exchanged knowing glances. They had both seen the transformation in their village before, when a new vendor came along offering something unique, and they feared what it might mean for their own livelihoods. Amara continued braiding, never breaking her silence. She seemed to communicate with her customers only through the art she created. There was something otherworldly about her. The braids she created weren't just a means of decoration or style, they carried a sense of power. Women would sit down at her stall with tired, weary faces, and by the time Amara had finished, their faces were transformed. They stood taller, walked with newfound confidence, and smiled in a way they hadn't before. As the days turned into weeks, Amara's reputation spread far and wide. Her name was known in every home in the village, even to the neighboring towns. More and more women came to the market, waiting in line for hours just to experience the magic of her braids. And each time, Amara remained as quiet and enigmatic as ever. No one knew where she came from. No one knew what had brought her to their village. All they knew was that her braids were like nothing they had ever seen before, and her silence seemed to weave its own kind of mystery and power into every strand of hair she touched. It wasn't long before some of the villagers began to feel uneasy. As Amara's influence grew, the other braiders, though silent in their anger, began to question her. They had seen how the women came back time and time again, offering praise and admiration. But something felt wrong. What is she really doing to their hair? Adama asked one evening as they watched yet another long line form in front of Amara's stall. It's more than just braiding. The women are different after they sit in her chair. They seem almost entranced. Mama Igioma, too, had begun to feel the unease creep into her thoughts. She had never believed in superstitions or the strange, magical tales that circulated in the villages, but she could not deny the strange energy that surrounded Amara. Every woman who left her stall seemed to radiate a kind of power, a kind of presence that made others look twice. In their hearts, the other braiders knew something was off, but they couldn't quite place their finger on it. The villagers, caught up in the allure of Amara's work, couldn't have known what lay beneath the surface. They didn't realize that Amara's braids, though beautiful, held more than just a unique style. They carried a dark secret, one that no one would uncover until it was too late. Her braids were not merely designed to impress. They were crafted to trap, to bind, and to control. For now, however, the villagers were blinded by the beauty of her work. They didn't question the long queues, the silence, or the strange energy that seemed to pulse from her stall. They didn't know what Amara was truly doing to their hair. But the winds of change were stirring in Olo, and soon, the truth would come to light in a way none of them could have ever imagined. Amara's days were spent in the bustling heart of Olo Market, where she meticulously braided the hair of anyone who sat before her, each strand woven with precision and grace. To the villagers, she was nothing more than a silent, enigmatic artist. But beneath the surface of her quiet demeanor, Amara harbored a dark secret.
She knew that her skill was not merely a gift of craft, it was part of a deeper, more dangerous power. Each day, after the sun dipped below the horizon and the market emptied, Amara would leave her small stall and make her way to a secluded hut deep within the dense forest that bordered the village. It was a place few ever visited, hidden from sight by thick vines and towering trees. The hut seemed ordinary from the outside, a simple structure made from wooden beams and thatch. Yet, inside, the air was thick with a strange energy that pulsed beneath the surface of reality. Upon entering the hut, Amara would pause for a moment, her eyes scanning the dimly lit room. The only light came from dozens of candles arranged in a circle, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows against the walls. The hut smelled of incense, earthy, rich, and thick with an ancient aroma. The walls were covered in intricate symbols, drawn in an unknown script that seemed to shimmer faintly as if they were alive. These markings told stories of dark magic and ancient rites, passed down through generations. But no one in the village had ever seen such symbols before. In the center of the room stood a large, antique mirror, its surface cracked and worn with age. It was framed in dark wood, twisted with carvings of mythical creatures, serpents, birds, and strange faces. The mirror was the key to her power, a conduit through which Amara could connect to forces that existed beyond the realm of the living. Amara would approach the mirror and sit cross-legged before it, her expression calm yet filled with purpose. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the incense that seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Her fingers hovered over the surface of the mirror, tracing the symbols etched in the wood. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to chant. The language she spoke was ancient, older than the village itself, older than the land they stood on. It was a language of spirits, a tongue that had been passed down through forbidden practices. The words held power, the kind of power that could bend the very fabric of reality. As she spoke, the air around her began to crackle with energy, thick and almost tangible. The faintest hum filled the room, vibrating in the air like the deep rumble of thunder on a distant horizon. As Amara chanted, the strands of hair she had braided during the day seemed to come alive. They were no longer mere locks of human hair, they were vessels for the spirits she had captured. One by one, the braids floated gently into the air, suspended in front of her like a series of glowing orbs. The candles flickered as if responding to the presence of something far beyond this world.
Each braid glowed faintly in the candlelight, the strands shimmering as though they were woven from threads of silver. Amara reached out, her hands moving with grace and purpose. She touched the strands gently, whispering words into the air. The braids trembled, their very essence trembling under her touch. It was a ritual that Amara had performed for years, and each time, she grew more powerful, more connected to the ancient forces she called upon. The braids held more than the hair of her customers. They held their spirits. With every weave, Amara had bound a part of her customer's essence, be it their vitality, their luck, or their joy. The braids were traps, carefully crafted to siphon the energy of the women who wore them. Amara's whispering intensified, and the spirits within the braids responded. They were not hostile, but they were trapped. Once Amara had completed her ritual, the women whose hair she had braided would begin to feel the effects. Slowly, over time, they would notice their luck changing. Their fortunes would wane, their health would deteriorate, and their joy would fade. Amara, on the other hand, grew stronger. She felt the energy flow through her, invigorating her, renewing her vitality. With every strand of hair, she became more powerful, her connection to the dark forces deepening. She no longer needed to eat or sleep as much, her physical body was sustained by the energy she siphoned from her victims. To the villagers, Amara was a savior, a mysterious artist whose braids brought beauty and grace. They never suspected that behind her silent demeanor was a mind focused on only one thing: power. Her customers were blissfully unaware of the dark forces at play. They sat in her chair, entranced by the fluidity of her hands, unaware that each strand she wove was a thread that would slowly unravel their happiness, their fortune, and their very essence. Amara's success was her greatest weapon. The villagers believed they were simply receiving a beautiful hairstyle, unaware of the pact they had unknowingly entered into. They trusted her hands, her quiet presence, and the beauty of the braids she wove. Little did they know, they were feeding her, and she was growing stronger with every passing day. Every night, as the ritual was complete, Amara would rise from the mirror and step back, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. She knew the consequences of her actions, and she reveled in the power it gave her. The villagers could never understand what she had done, not unless they uncovered the truth behind her braids, if they ever dared to ask the right questions. But Amara was clever. She had carefully cultivated her image, her silence, her quiet mystery, and it was enough to distract anyone who might have suspected something amiss. She played the role of the humble artist, the silent woman who could do no wrong. She kept her intentions hidden behind a veil of beauty and craft, using the villagers' ignorance to her advantage. As the days passed, the villagers continued to flock to her, eager to experience the magic of her braids. Each braid carried a piece of them, each braid was a link in the chain that bound their spirits to her, their lives intertwined with hers in ways they could never comprehend. And Amara, in the stillness of her hut, would prepare for the next day's work,
knowing that with each new braid, her power grew ever more formidable. But the truth, as it always does, had a way of slipping through the cracks. The villagers, though they had no idea, were beginning to change. Some would speak of strange dreams, others of unexplained illnesses. The braids, once seen as a symbol of beauty, began to take on a darker significance. Slowly, the threads of Amara's manipulation would unravel, and the villagers would find themselves caught in a web far more intricate and dangerous than they could have ever imagined. In time, someone would come to understand what had happened, and when they did, they would learn the terrible truth of what Amara had been doing on their hair all along. But by then, it might be too late. The villagers had become her vessels, and it would take more than mere words to undo the power she had bound to them. The once bustling hair-braiding corner of Olo Market had transformed. What used to be a vibrant place where women gathered to gossip, share stories, and get their hair styled, now felt quiet and empty. In the past, customers had eagerly flocked to the regular braiders for the familiar hands of trusted artists who had braided their hair for years. But now, there was a shift. Day by day, the long lines at the market shifted toward Amara, the mysterious new braider who had captured everyone's attention with her talent. The others could only watch from the sidelines as her stall overflowed with customers, while theirs remained eerily still. Among the braiders who watched with growing frustration was Ngozi. A fiery woman in her early 30s, Ngozi had been braiding hair in the market for over a decade. Her fingers were nimble, her skills unparalleled, and her customers were loyal. But that was before Amara arrived. At first, it was subtle. Ngozi noticed how the villagers began to speak more about Amara, her silence, her perfectly braided designs, and how they felt so different after sitting in her chair. Some claimed to feel lighter, others said they felt luckier, as if Amara's braids were a key to a newfound fortune. And the stories were infectious soon. Even the most skeptical women in the market were curious. Ngozi, who had always been the center of attention, felt a deep sense of frustration. It wasn't just about losing her customers, it was about the way they spoke of Amara as if she were some mystical being, someone with powers she could never hope to match. There were rumors that Amara didn't accept money, that she had an eerie, unspoken charm about her. One day, Ngozi overheard a conversation between a group of women who had just visited Amara's stall. "She doesn't even take money. They say she just looks at you and your problems disappear," one woman said. "I can't explain it, but I felt lighter as soon as I left her stall," another woman replied. With each passing day, Ngozi's suspicion deepened. How could one person have such an effect on everyone? How could she be so perfect at braiding, with every strand precisely aligned, every twist and turn of her handiwork flawless? Ngozi's own skill, honed through years of hard work, seemed to pale in comparison to Amara's effortless perfection. But it wasn't just Amara's braids that disturbed her, it was the strange aura that surrounded her. Amara's silence was unsettling. She never spoke to her customers unless necessary, and even then, her voice was soft, almost like she was whispering in an unknown language. Ngozi had watched Amara closely for weeks, trying to catch a glimpse of the secret that lay behind her success, but it was as if the woman were a puzzle that could never be solved. She was the very embodiment of mystery, and it drove Ngozi mad with curiosity. One evening, as the sun began to set, Ngozi watched Amara pack up her stall. The market was beginning to empty, but Amara remained focused, weaving the final braids of the day, her face blank as usual. Ngozi felt a sense of urgency, something was off. Amara was never there for long after sunset. She would always pack up and leave quickly, disappearing into the darkening streets without a word. This strange behavior only fueled Ngozi's growing sense of unease. Determined to uncover Amara's secret, Ngozi made a bold decision. She would follow Amara. She knew it was risky. If Amara caught her, it would look suspicious, but the desire to know the truth outweighed the fear of being caught. As the market grew quieter and Amara finished her final customer of the evening, Ngozi took a deep breath and began to follow at a distance. She kept to the shadows, staying out of sight, but her eyes never left Amara. The moon had just risen, casting an eerie glow over the marketplace as the last few villagers scattered to their homes. Amara moved with an almost unnatural calm, walking through the streets with purpose, her eyes fixed ahead. Ngozi's heart pounded as she quickened her pace, careful not to let Amara see her shadow moving behind. Amara's path led her out of the village and into the thick forest that bordered Olo Market. The trees loomed high above, their branches tangled in a web of dark, knotted limbs. Ngozi's breath quickened as she realized that Amara was taking the same route that no one in the village ever used after dark. It was a path few dared to walk, as the forest was thick and filled with mysterious legends. But Amara moved through it with ease, as if she had walked this path countless times before. Ngozi pressed on, now feeling a cold shiver creep down her spine. The forest was dense, and the shadows seemed to whisper around her. She tried to stay close, but the thick underbrush and the darkening night made it harder to keep track of Amara's every move. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they arrived at a clearing. Amara stopped in front of a small, hidden hut that Ngozi had never seen before. It was covered in thick vines, its wooden walls barely visible through the dense growth. Ngozi crouched behind a nearby tree, her heart pounding as she watched Amara disappear inside the hut. For a long moment, Ngozi just stood there, unsure of what to do. The mysterious woman, who had so captivated the entire village, had finally revealed a place where she went after the market closed. A place hidden from the eyes of the public. Amara's braids had seemed perfect, too perfect to be normal. And now, this. What was inside that hut? Ngozi knew that she had stumbled upon something much larger than she had expected. Amara's secret was not just about her braiding skills, it was about her power, a power that seemed to come from some dark and mysterious source. She had to know more. But Ngozi also knew that to get answers, she would need to tread carefully. She couldn't let Amara know she had followed her. She would need to wait for the right moment, to gather more information and learn the full extent of what was really happening. With a sense of urgency, Ngozi turned and retreated into the shadows, her mind racing. The jealous seed that had been planted in her heart now grew into something darker, a thirst for knowledge and a burning desire to expose Amara for what she truly was. But one thing was certain, Ngozi had uncovered the first clue in a mystery that was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined.